Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another podcast episode. So I just want to quickly say before I upload this, because I don't know when you guys are going to be listening to this, but I have been having so many difficulties with this episode. I honestly have no idea why. If you're following me on Instagram, you will know that I have posted on there. I haven't really been keeping you guys updated like I said I would, just because I'm not even sure what is going on at this point. I have recorded this episode so many times, and every time I'm done recording, the audio is all messed up, and I had a good file to go and upload, and then the audio got, like, during rendering and finalizing, somehow it got messed up. I don't even know. I really don't know what's going on with it, so I'm not sure when you guys are going to listen to this. I don't know at this point. It's so frustrating. I'm surprised I have not given up yet. That just goes to show the level of dedication I have. But I am going to say this episode is going to be a little shorter than normal. It's not a conspiracy theory and it's not a crime case. It's more of like a reincarnation case. I know a while back, a few of you had said that you were interested in reincarnation cases. Well, I don't even want to say cases because it's not even a case, but reincarnation, I guess, stories. And so I have one here. I thought this one was a really interesting one to kind of kick off with, starting the reincarnation. I don't want to say like series, but I'm going to start doing these a little bit more. This one is on Barbro Karlen, who says she is the reincarnated Anne Frank. This story is definitely very interesting to listen to. I don't believe in reincarnation, but it's definitely an interesting, catching story. So before we get into this episode, I'm going to take a quick moment and ask all of you guys to please rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you are listening to. It'll really help boost the ratings up for the show and keep me being able to produce shows for you guys. And if you could please take a few moments and follow us on Instagram or Twitter. On Instagram, we are the Crime Vine Podcast, and on Twitter, it's the Crime Vine PL1. I'm usually super active on both, except for, I'm not going to lie, you guys have caught me this past, week or two. I have not been as active as I normally am. And the reason being is I have been working like 55 hours a week. It is absolutely insane. I am exhausted, and it's really hard to, keep up with researching for content and, producing the content, editing, audio, literally recording, like all of that stuff. And then, also posting on Instagram and coming up with memes and, all that stuff. So it's been hard, but I'm going on vacation in, probably about, 2 weeks. So hopefully I can get some work done while I'm on vacation, but also enjoy my vacation a little bit too. So let's hope. But anyway, so if you guys don't already, grab yourselves a drink because this vine will definitely rope you in. Now, Barbro Karlen believes she is the reincarnated Anne Frank, and she was born in Sweden in 1954. And ever since she was a small child, she would always have dreams about another life. These dreams would scare her, and she would wake up shaking and frightened. At just 2 years old, she told her parents that her name was not Barbro, but that it was Anne. Her parents didn't think much of it, and they just dismissed it as her imagination. Barbro carried on having the dreams and couldn't understand why she felt she was living in two worlds. By this time, she knew that her name was Anne Frank and couldn't understand why they kept calling her Barbro. She realized that they were not her real parents, even though they insisted that they actually were. Barbro would always say that her real father was going to come soon and collect her. By the time she was 6 years old, her parents began to grow worried about her odd behaviors. They then took her to see a psychiatrist. Around this time, Barbro began to realize that nobody would ever believe her. When she visited the psychiatrist, she didn't tell him her stories. She was afraid that she would be taken away, and so she kept quiet. The psychiatrist told her parents that she was just a normal child living in a fantasy world and that she would soon grow out of it. By the reaction she was getting, she decided to just keep quiet about all of this and keep it to herself. At the age of 7, she started to read and write in school, and she was ecstatic about this because she was able to write down her memories. But she just ended up throwing them away because she didn't want anyone to find them. And the Diary of Anne Frank was only published in a few languages at this time, and Swedish was not one of them. She was about 11 years old, and she had written poetry, but she also started to question about reincarnation, where we come from and where we go. One day, a friend of the family saw some of her work that she had kept and asked her parents if she could show it to someone with the idea of getting it published. This was her first book, called Man on Earth. Barbro never wrote a poem about her reincarnation, though, purely because she had started to feel silly and slightly ashamed to think that she had told everyone that she was somebody else. The reason was that after she had started school, Barbro realized that Anne Frank was in fact a real person. The book was published in 1947, but was only then beginning to become popular. Barbro realized that it was no longer smart to go around saying that she had been Anne Frank. At the age of 10, Barbro was taken on a trip to Europe by her parents. Soon they went to Amsterdam, and her parents decided to take in all the sights, and of course, one of these was the house of Anne Frank. After calling for a cab, Barbro suddenly turned around to them and said, "We don't need a cab. I know exactly where we are and how to get to the house." Her parents were startled and replied, "How do you know this? We have never been here before." But Barbro just turned to them and quietly replied, "Let me show you the way." Her parents didn't know what to think, but they said, "Okay," and they started to walk to the house, crossing roads and turning corners until Barbro said, "It's just around the next corner." And she was right. As they entered the house, Barbro was heard to say, "They have changed the steps outside." Her parents didn't know what to say, but as they entered the house, Barbro began to get a really horrible feeling. This was her dream. The atmosphere was clingy, and she felt a tightness in her chest. Total and undeniable fear. The dreams were suddenly real and right in front of her. They entered the room where Anne Frank had lived. Barbro was terrified and her hands were cold and clammy, and her mother believed that she was ill. She wanted to take her outside, but Barbro said no. She wanted to see it. She wanted to make sure that everything was the same and exactly how she remembered, but the feelings were getting worse. She noticed that Anne Frank's pictures were still on the wall, and she excitedly told her parents to look at the pictures that were there. But the weird thing is, there was actually no pictures on the wall. Her mother asked what she was talking about, and she replied, "The pictures were there. I know they were." So her mother walked over to one of the men who worked there and asked if there had been pictures on the wall, and the man replied with yes. They had taken them down because the people were taking them. Then her mother realized that this was real. Everything Barbro had said was true. She hugged her and told her that now she understood. You are not alone anymore. Barbro decided to wait outside, and on the way to the front door, she suddenly saw a man in a green uniform standing over her. She cried and ran, only to fall over the step. When she turned around, he was gone. In fact, he had never been there in the first place. She said this was a flashback. Barbro's mother went on to become a spiritual churchgoer, and her father dismissed it all purely because he didn't want anything to shake his safe world. The most compelling proof has to be the fact that Barbro has actually met and talked to Anne Frank's cousin, Buddy Elias. Buddy is an actor who has starred in The Love Boat, Crime Scene, and The Magic Mountain. He is also the last living relative of Anne Frank. He had heard about Barbro through her publisher, even though at the time she hadn't written her story. Buddy was intrigued and asked to meet her. Even though he didn't believe in reincarnation, he was curious to see who this woman was going around and telling everybody that she was Anne Frank. He invited her to dinner, and as Barbro knocked on the door, Buddy came out and they both looked at each other. Then they fell into each other's arms and both cried. They sat for 2 hours and talked, and then she realized that Buddy was the president of Anne Frank's foundation. This put him in a very vulnerable position because he wasn't sure how the other members would react to the story. When the newspaper asked him, "Do you believe that Barbro is the reincarnation of Anne Frank?" he replied, "Yes." Since then, Buddy has been hounded by the press to such an extent that he has now backed away from interviews, but keeps in touch with Barbro once a week, and she stays with him when she visits Switzerland. Now, I don't know about you guys, but like I said, I definitely do not believe in reincarnation, but this story definitely gets you kind of thinking about the what if. Like, it just doesn't really make any sense as to how she would know this information that, how she would have these memories and how she even knew how to get to the house in Amsterdam. Like, you're in a completely different country. You don't know anything about this country. Like, you've never been here before, but yet you know exactly how to get to the house. You know exactly what corner to turn, you know, what roads to take, all that stuff. And then know that there was pictures on the wall, but at one point, but then, you know, obviously they had to take them down. But how would she know that there was pictures on the walls if she had never been to this house? So like, it definitely gets, you know, the wheels turning. And for Anne Frank's relative, like her cousin Buddy, to, you know, be like, oh my gosh, this is Anne Frank. And he didn't believe in reincarnation at all. And he did, you know, he obviously has met Anne Frank. Like, obviously, you know, he grew up with her, you know, they were family, he knew her. And for him to think that this was her is kind of, you know, a little questionable. So I don't know. I don't know if this is all like a hoax, just like one giant story. We definitely never we don't know for sure, and I don't think we will ever really know for sure. I just think it's very interesting to listen to. It's so I can't even explain my thoughts on this. It's definitely interesting. I don't even know what to say about it, just because maybe it's the fact that I don't believe in reincarnation, so it's a little kind of hard to comprehend. But at the same time, it's a very like gets the gears turning and really starts to make you think about things. So I want to know what you guys think about this case, and like if you believe in reincarnation, if you don't, and if this kind of, you know, opens your mind a little bit more. I want to hear what you guys think about this. Head over to my Instagram at the Crime Band Podcast and engage with me there. You can send me a DM, you can comment on one of my posts, and let me know what you guys think about reincarnation and what you think about this case. Like I said, I'm sorry this episode is so short. I will definitely make it up in next week's episode, but please send me your guys' requests on cases you want to hear, or conspiracy theories, or even more reincarnation stories that you want to hear. And also don't forget to rate and review this podcast. And I guess I will talk to you guys in my next podcast episode.